with your host, Knotty Karate.
Scruffy-looking nerf herder.
And a rotating roundtable of awesomeness.
Go switch off.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes In-Depth.com podcast.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Hey everyone, welcome again to another SWGOH In-Depth podcast. I'm your host, Knotty Karate, and as always, I am joined by my ride or die homies, Nukin and Morningstar. What's up, guys?
What's up?
Right now, you may have noticed we took a little bit of a break over the holidays, spending time with family. Small little break. It's been well over a month. There's a lot to talk about lately. And the first thing that we wanted to bring up was that we have a new Discord server. People are coming from far and wide to just come and hang out there. So please come join us along the way. But without any further ado, let's get into what we really want to talk about today. So let's talk about Jedi Training Rey. We had a lot of ideas about what her impact would be on the game earlier. We've all had the experience, well, some of us have had the experience of fighting against her and being able to use her on even arena teams and how she holds up. What do you think, Nukin? What's your assessment of her so far on her impact in the meta?
Without my personal opinion, we can look at the meta report, and she's tied now with CLS. You know, CLS might climb a little bit now that people have the second opportunity to acquire him through the heroic event. But yeah, she's quite up high on there, and there's definitely been a lot of talk about what's the best team, and will that team have a huge impact in the arena, and we have some team suggestions that we want to talk about with you guys.
Yeah, so ultimately what I've noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it seems like everyone who's running a Rey lead, BB-8 and R2 are mandatory to make that team work. There's a couple of reasons for that we can get into, but usually most other people are using a tank and then another character, whether it's a damage dealer or a support character. Is that what you've noticed on your shards? Because I know a lot of them are unique, but that seems to be her trend.
Yeah, so there's definitely a resistance core of the droids, and some people have taken that to the extreme and put 4 droids under her leadership. I'm not sure if that's the best meta team, but it definitely works on offense at least. There's a few other lineups that people have been trying. People have tried to use Hermit Yoda on the team. People have tried to use both versions of Kenobi, that's Old Ben and General Kenobi. People have tried to use CLS, and then other people have dusted off their Scavenger Reys. So there's definitely a lot of different lineups. It's unclear at this moment in time which one is the superior lineup, but what do you think is the hardest lineup that you guys have faced thus far?
Well, I can say for sure that other than just the mandatory trio of Rey, R2, and BB-8, that it makes a lot of sense to have General Kenobi on the team as well. I mean, he's almost designed for the job and is the best tank in the game. Mm-hmm. He's kind of a no-brainer. And then the next choice is some people will throw in another tank, like Old Ben, for example. I was wondering if Shore Trooper could fit the bill too if you didn't have Old Ben Zeta, because Old Ben Zeta makes it almost impossible to get to the Rey and the droids to take them out with many teams. Although just proper target selection with almost any team will beat it. This just happens to be a current meta that we're seeing. Thrawn can work there, Han can work there, Luke. Actually, we've seen Luke not really be that very valuable as the strongest meta character that kind of broke the game. It's interesting that he's less valuable on this team. Yeah, but he's suddenly he's not someone you can just plop into any team and it makes it more awesome. He's a liability in some cases. So, yeah, but I think most people are still figuring this out, and we don't know what that ideal fifth character, and for most players, I would imagine it's who you have available and geared up to be able to compete in Arena that one would use. And currently, I'm rocking Thrawn in the fifth slot, and he seems to be working fine there.
So I was one of those people that did not acquire her. So in my experience, I've only ever seen her, when I'm fighting in arena battles. And so far, I haven't struggled at all against teams that are running her. Now, keep in mind that I'm on a slightly younger arena shard than Knotty and Nukin. So in general, shards like that, the meta will form at the very, very top 5, 10, maybe top 20. And then it will trickle down, like old metas will trickle down past, right? So generally, I don't rank that high, so I expect to see similarly modded and similarly geared characters. And so far, I haven't seen her ran with droids, and double Kenobi is kind of rare. Hermit Yoda, not a lot of people would have him on my shard, but a couple people do. And so far, I have not had a whole lot of trouble defeating these teams. The standard team that people seem to be using right now are just, Rey as leader with the two droids and with Rey and a tank. And my experience, she doesn't hold as well on D as people think she does. Now, mind you, I do not auto my arena battles like some people do. I fight those manually, so I win. And yeah, she I think she might be a little overhyped on the defensive aspect. But I think in top end arena shards who are able to run any group of these characters fully maxed out and fully Zetaed, the experience is going to be quite different.
All right, so we have some suggestions here. If you're going to run Resistance Filth, you have a shiny new toy, so might as well use it, I guess. So I think that you start off with the Leadership Zeta. It really makes
on Rey
core, do its thing. It's very similar to Zeta Finn's leadership. And then if you haven't already Zetaed your 2, we suggest that you do both. But the order would be as follows. Do Number Crunch first, and then go to your Soccer Ball droid and do Roll with the Punches with BB-8, and then go back to the trash can and do Combat Analysis, and then make your way back to Rey and do Virtuous Protector, which is the one that basically turns her into a RNG Fulcrum Ahsoka. And depending on what you're running, whether it's Hermit Yoda or Old Ben or CLS or the Scavenger Rey or even maybe Talzin works as well, give them a Zeta or 2 or whatever they're using, and then go back and round off the team with Rey's last Zeta. And I think that's a good order for Zetaing the whole team, which is something I don't think anyone else has really touched on quite yet. They've always done the order for just Rey. But if you do that for the team, it'll be very strong. I mean, it's kind of like just throwing money at it. Any team with 8 Zetas is going to be good, right?
Right. Hopefully so.
Another interesting... Would absolutely hope so.
Yeah, one would hope so. Another interesting part of this team, in particular, is that I have not seen probably 2 people in 2 different arena shards that ran Rey as a support character, as not the leader, basically, and they did that for about 1 day after they dropped multiple ranks. So Rey seems to have very, very little value as a pickup character on, for example, what would be the Titan team. We have Luke lead Thrawn, Kenobi, Han Solo, and R2. Mm-hmm. She cannot replace anyone on that team, and it seems like a complete shift. As someone who has gone from the Titan team to Rey just today, at the time of this recording, it's very interesting and kind of nerve-wracking because I don't really understand the mechanics of how it works, and it's kind of a risk, but I did put in the gear to level up BB-8 and her, so why not give it a try? I'm not sure if I'm super impressed yet, but a lot of it depends on what you're facing in the arena as well.
Mm-hmm. So you were talking about Rey being better, not as a pickup character on the Titan team, which is under a CLS lead, but more as a leader, right? So if you're going to run Rey as your leader, knowing that, it kind of will change how you mod the character. So,
oh yeah, this is a great point because it's kind of counterintuitive. Please go on.
So as a pickup character, you probably give her a speed set, but as a leader, it seems like it's better to mod her as an attacker with the crit damage set, just giving her raw damage, a crit damage triangle, an offense cross, and a bunch of offense that way, because she really does do a decent amount of damage, that extra crit damage from her leader ability, and on the proper team with all the cleansing and debuffs, she can do some 20 to 30k crits.
I'd say in general on the tenacity cross, because her basic attack, depending on like the first part of her Omega, states that she'll get an extra 25% damage if these 4 conditions are met. The first condition is if she has no debuffs. So no matter what, even if she doesn't meet the other 3 conditions, as long as she's not debuffed, she'll do she'll do the extra 25% damage. If she meets the other one, she'll do a grand total of 100, which would effectively that's 200% damage. Well, a little harder to hit those conditions, but if you can keep her from being debuffed, it guarantees 25% extra damage.
That's a good point.
And but more, what the theme we're talking about is that to mod her like an attacker is the way that it seems to be working, and that also implies that you're also modding the droids. Like, how did you word it earlier, Nukin? Like mini attackers? Can you elaborate on that?
Mini attackers? Yeah. Well, technically they're miniature characters.
Right, yeah. Soft carries.
They're really short.
I wanted to call them
midgets play them.
I wanted to call them semi-carries, but no one I don't think plays Dota. Basically, give them crit damage triangles, but then kind of mod them like fast support characters.
Okay, so how would you mod them specifically? Different, because typically R2 and BB-8 would be modded for health and potency, right?
Yes. Yeah, so before you're modding your resistance droids with like health protection triangles and stuff like that, but you actually give them crit damage triangles under Rey lead, and so they do a little bit more damage. And I think that you do that as well because when you Zeta BB-8 roll with the punches, and you do, it's basically Wigs 2.0 for resistance.
Yeah,
they really are Rebels 2.0. That does a lot of damage. I mean, if you have flat offense and the crit damage, you can basically take out almost some of or most of Kenobi's HP. So that's cool. And I think you could probably mod Rey with the tenacity cross too, especially if you haven't Zeta'd her virtuous protector yet. So that's probably good advice. And then depending on whatever you use for the rest of the team, it's very, very standard after that. Any tanks, just give them a bunch of like protection, and any support characters, just a bunch of speed, and voila, you have modded your resistance scumbag team.
It's also, I don't know if it goes without saying, but there's something with BB-8 and R2 becoming these very unexpected damage dealers. And this is obviously contingent on having BB-8s roll with the punches, Zeta, because as soon as Rey calls him, he will call someone of the same faction, which is either her or R2, assuming you don't have any other resistance on the team, which those teams don't seem to be working out. I've seen people throw Royal Resistance Trooper on there, as well as Finn or Poe, and it's just not what the team was designed for, as it would seem. So we've covered a lot of what people want to know about Jedi Rey, which there are a couple of videos of, too, to support this right now. And not to get dragged down into what the new meta is, in spite of what we all thought would happen in the past, we now have the opportunity, for the first time in a light side territory battle, to actually see how Jedi Rey is going to affect those combat missions, which I'm pretty excited about, and I'm pretty sure that anyone has her as well will be. One interesting thing about this is that because you can only use a certain number of characters, and it's done and burned, that we have the opportunity to split up a resistance team and maybe use a Rey lead and a Finn lead What were you saying about that earlier, Nukin? I found that concept pretty interesting.
So in every phase or vertical slice, typically you're using 4 different teams. And if by whatever chance you're on a phase that has 2 light side nodes, where you can use basically any light side character, if you have Jedi Training Rey, RJT, you can run 2 separate resistance teams. Her as the lead on one team and Zeta Finn on the other if you have that Zeta. And it's the first time that anyone's able to do that now. I think that's good, probably because both teams have auto potential. So now you have 2 different resistance teams that could probably auto some of the nodes, especially if they're before phase 6. So that's nice. Anything that really saves time is a welcome sight for me. I don't have her, so I can't really do that. But for the people that do, that's an option for them.
I'm kind of wondering how the team would be split up. I would imagine that under a Finn lead, you want to take Poe, and under a Rey lead, you'd want to take BB-8, and then you just kind of drop Pilot, Trooper, or R2 wherever you can to fill up slots.
Yeah, I think
the core of the original Resistance team is Finn lead with Resistance Trooper and Poe, so you keep them together. I think the consensus is R2 is better used on a completely separate team from the Resistance. But, I mean, because the Resistance pilot still gets Rey's lead if you use him on her team, right? You can still use BB-8 with Rey and Resistance pilot, and you split up your Resistance pretty well. Ultimately, like the core of Finn with Poe and Resistance Trooper, I mean, that could get you through those missions before Rey ever came out, before BB-8 was really a thing. Mm-hmm. So being able to use BB-8 with Resistance Pilot with a Rey lead, if that can be your new core for a secondary team that could get you through another Phase 6 combat mission, I mean, the Resistance is just overpowered right now.
Yeah, they're definitely really strong. I think, I know what, I have a light bulb idea. So Scavenger Rey doesn't have expose on her ability, so you probably use her with Jedi Training Rey. Yeah. So let's think about it for a second. So on the Rey Jedi Training Light Side TV team, if you're going to split up the Resistance, it's probably Jedi Training Rey in the lead with BB-8, Scavenger Rey, and like R2, I guess. And then with Finn, you're using Finn, Poe, Pilot, and Trooper, right?
Yeah, the other characters that apply expose.
Uh-huh.
Yep, that makes perfect sense.
But keep in mind that R2 still might be better suited to be used outside of a Resistance core team.
That's like a whole other level of meta.
Mm-hmm.
A team based around 3 Resistance characters, you can set up another team based around 4 Resistance characters and still have R2 left over to run on a Rebel team or something. Mm-hmm. A special mission that you have struggle with, or something that requires Rebels.
Yeah. Oh, actually, that kind of dovetails into what our next topic was, guys, is that for the special missions over combat missions, because Nukin, in your guild right now, you guys are running into I guess it's a high-quality problem of if you have Rolo already 7-starred, which in myself and Morningstar's guild, we do not have her. She's 6-starred and on her way there, so it'll be a few weeks before we can even try it. But you wanted to bring up how much should a guild value the special missions over the combat missions because it's very difficult to complete. Was that an accurate description there?
Yeah. So the ATST gives you, I think, 30 currency per player that completes it successfully. So if all 50 players complete that, was at 1,500 currency?
1,500, yeah.
That is pretty substantial, and I think it's probably worth it to prioritize that over an extra wave or 2 of a combat mission, personally. You should definitely listen to your guild officers, whatever they suggest, but maybe they can be easily enticed by our feedback. I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely, it's not a hard mission. Like, you can definitely beat it. It's what makes it difficult is that if you put too much strength into the team, it'll spread you pretty thin and it'll make the other missions more difficult. So maybe you can utilize even Jedi Rey training under a Rolo lead or something. You know, she's not the best pickup character, but she's definitely quite strong, and that might be helpful. I think the ATSD dynamics do come into play, and you can potentially, if you can use characters like R2D2 and that we were talking about earlier, other resistant characters like that, maybe you can throw in Rey and BB-8 in there too. So it's an extra character that you have in your lineup, in your arsenal, which is good because you're already stretched pretty thin in that phase.
Mm-hmm. We'll say with it being like if all 50 members do it, it's 1,500 currency, right? So if you look at it from a mathematical standpoint, let's say you're a guild that's getting 41 stars. Now, the idea would be, do you work on characters to get closer and closer to 45 stars, you know, like focus things down to get another star or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. Or do you focus on characters to beat the special mission? Now, what is the difference between 41 stars and 45 stars in the guild event store currency? I'm pretty sure it doesn't add up to 1,500. Maybe with the 4 stars it does, but if you're at 43 stars, we know that getting to 44 and 45 are just like, it's generally, they're GP walls. Even if your guild is able to do all of the combat missions 6 waves, you might still be short on the massive amounts of GP you need to hit 45 stars. So it would behoove you to actually focus your energy into being able to complete the combat mission and actually recoup an extra, like, let's say 750 or 1,000 guild event store tokens, being that 1,500 is 100 shy being able to buy 20 new gold pieces.
Yeah. That's true. A lot of this depends on the relative GP and progression of the guild and participation they have, which is another point that we wanted to bring up, was a Zeta on Jin. I remember this was something over the last month and a half. It became very widely discussed because some people have a full Rogue One team to do that 6 of 6 combat mission in light side territory battles, right? I was one of those people, and then I thought, was like, well, you know what? Even if I can only get to the last wave and not be able to complete it, that's still, I contributed, you know, I didn't slack on it. And I thought, really, what can that Zeta add? Just protection when they gain a buff? But I'm telling you, it made it like a cakewalk. And I don't regret spending it. I've only had one opportunity since and until this new light side territory battles. I guess at the time of the release of this recording, it will have started already. But it'll be my only second opportunity to watch a Zeta Jin completely crush the opposition. So that's kind of fun.
I think it's a good leader ability for purposes of territory battles.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't really serve a purpose other than to pad the GP of Cassian's U-Wing.
Yeah, I agree.
Ultimately, I think it depends on what you're trying to set up. Like someone like me, I have to use my resources very wisely. Like I said, a lot of territory battles is just about raw, massive GP numbers. So in order to pad that, like I would work on pilots over characters that don't have a ship. So I would honestly be. I can't 6 of 6 it. I honestly I stopped working on light side characters as soon as I hit 111 waves. But ideally, over time, I would rather spend the resources gearing up the 5 Rogue One pilots versus worrying about farming a long-term farm character, because I still do not have Baze. He's sitting he's unlocked with 10 stars towards his next, towards, or 10 shards till 4 stars. So someone like me, like I prefer, like when I do decide to work on Rogue One, I'm going to do my best to just gear up all the 5 of the Rogue One pilots, and I will put Zetas on them if need be, because they serve alternative purpose. If nothing else, they make the ships ridiculously powerful. They pad your GP. So I do believe that like Jin's lead is great for territory battles. I think if you're not running Chase, a really strong Chase, you're probably going to have to Zeta Jin. I mean, hell, you might have to Zeta Cassian, and you might have to freaking Zeta K2SO. I mean,
let's not go overboard here.
Well, yeah. Slow your roll here.
But it's like, if nothing else, it's just you'd have to decide what you want to focus on. And if Baze is something that is really far away for you, putting a Zeta on Jin's leader ability isn't going to hurt you. That's for sure.
I have some words of hope for people that despise rebels.
Go.
For the very first time, me, was able to beat 6 for 6 on the Rogue One mission, and I do not have a Zeta Jin, and it was with Gear 10 characters, and K2SO, and I think Cassian were Gear 8 or Gear 9 or something like that. So, granted that was probably pure RNG, but it is doable. So maybe you don't Zeta Jin, but she's good. That also makes the team better for territory wars, like if you want to set it on defense. And actually, I think we were going to talk about that, weren't we?
Yeah, we are. But before we do that, there's a couple other things, because we're still on the topic of light side territory battles, right?
Oh, yes.
So one of them was also Phoenix needs to come into this for several reasons, because not only are Phoenix becoming more important for different events that show up, like the Shadows and whatever the event is right now, where you can use either Night Sisters or Phoenix. And there's Sidious in Wave 4 and Nihilus in Wave 8 that are extremely difficult to kill and require a lot of strategy to do so. And so people are wondering, what kind of teams do you use in territory wars or territory battles? What kinds of teams do you use? I know Morningstar, you have a lot of experience with using the Phoenix. Who doesn't make the cut on the team? And if you do want to invest the resources for gear and or Zetas, what is the order for that you found that has worked?
So I think who doesn't make the team is dependent on what you're willing to put into them resource-wise. I think that if you're not going to Zeta any of them, Sabine is the odd man out, odd woman out. Mm-hmm. Honestly, without a Zeta, she's really not that useful. Her passive ability, well, it's nice. It really in territory battles, you want the survivability of choppers and Zeb's uniques. So I would say the Sabine is the odd man out if you have no intention of Zetaing anyone. However, if you want to just put one Zeta on a Phoenix, I would suggest doing Sabine's first, because the biggest gripe about the Phoenix pre-Zeta is that they lack damage, significantly, right? So with the Zeta, it allows you to put a lot of expose and a lot of stagger.
She does AoE expose and stagger, right?
Yes. The Zeta is AoE expose and it's AoE stagger with AoE expose, and then it stacks exposes. I mean, it does. It's unavoidable, so it goes through to foresight, but it does not go through tenacity. And RNG will dictate whether or not it procs the extra 5 expose, because she adds expose for every Phoenix ally on the team. So she can do a maximum of 6 expose on one character if procs them all.
Hashtag power creep.
Yeah. Right. So because of that, her Zeta instantly gives that team damage. Right? You don't need Zeb's Zeta, which is, I mean, don't get me wrong, that's another ridiculously powerful damage Zeta. You wouldn't need Ezra's Zeta, which is also 30 to 50k on a 2-turn cooldown. If you're really thinking about putting the resources into them, I would suggest you go Sabine, Hera, Kanan, Ezra, and then Zeb. Or really, I think it's a coin toss between Ezra and Zeb, because yes, Ezra's Zeta puts that big damage on a 2-turn cooldown, but Zeb's is completely unavoidable.
Would you agree that they're kind of similar to First Order, that without a huge number of Zetas on the whole team, no one even really considers them using them in Arena? Well, they have so many other places to be used, right?
I would say, honestly, in my experience, the Phoenix require more resources than the First Order team. You have to, if you were to line them up, both teams maxed out with similar mods, the Phoenix team will destroy the First Order team.
Oh, let's not get carried away here.
Well, he's seen it.
So I have a question actually for Phoenix Morningstar. Do you run them on defense or offense for territory wars?
For territory wars, I run them on offense, because if you put them on defense, all you have to do is send in a bunch of crap teams and take out Hera, and then all of a sudden, none of those uniques matter.
Okay, and then when you take them on
all the uniques, then
who do you pit them against on offense?
Yeah, that was my question.
Difficult Kenobi Zeris teams, difficult CLS teams, pretty much anybody who it looks like the guild would struggle to beat.
Wow, you can beat a Kenobi Zeris team with Phoenix?
They shred Kenobi. So yeah, in my experience, they will beat the Titan team. Like I said, if it's similar mods, if you're facing a whale or a kraken who has just a ridiculously good amount of really awesome mods. Like, I'm a free to play player. I have as many the mods I have. I farmed.
We're getting into the team versus team composition, and one of the other things we want to talk about is territory wars, which has been kind of a big theme, especially over the holidays lately, is that there are certain teams that are really worth building toward this. What's the payout for it? How do you set up your defense? How is your guild coordinating? Now that we're getting into team comps, what works against what doesn't work, offense, defense, Territory Wars is a really interesting game mode that we've been experiencing, where we have a lot of opportunities to run things that got to knock the dust off of and figure out new team comps. So that's an interesting creative battle here, but how do the teams that we've been looking at right now, like Jedi Rey, Phoenix, Jin and crew, for example, in Territory Wars, how are you setting up your defense and what's been working or not working for you?
Yeah, Territory Wars, I think, is probably the most fun game mode, personally, for myself, since the tank raid has come out. And I really hope we get another raid eventually. The only drawback that I think Territory Wars has is that it's literally back-to-back and there's no breathing room. So if they could just space it out an extra day or two, it would be perfect. But Territory Wars, when you do play it and you're ready to play it, it's super fun. And I do a mixture of both defense and offense. And for defense, basically what you're supposed to do is run teams that the AI will be able to handle playing. These are teams that have simple kits, or the characters have simple kits, I should say. Teams that gain a lot of protection or health, or characters that can revive, which is very important sometimes on specific teams, are quite strong. So I would recommend, a Jedi Training Rey team, a CLS team on defense, but with a bunch of rebels. Other teams like the Sith are quite good. The Rogue One team is quite good. Phoenix actually work on defense. I know Morningstar said you can take out Hera, but there's a lot of room for error, especially if you're running double taunters, where they could just slightly not finish off Hera, and then suddenly she just regens back to full, and you can't reach her behind the double taunts of Kanan and Chopper and stuff like that. So even Phoenix worked on defense, but yeah, if they can beat a Kenobi Zeris team on offense, maybe use them on offense. And actually, just moving into offense, basically the gist there is to use teams that require some finesse. This would be teams that the AI does not play very well because either the characters have very complex kits or they're just not like super meta teams, but they can still work if you're behind a human controller. So basically everything else you can run like a Phasma First Order team. Actually, speaking of First Order, the Kylo Ren Unmasked is a hidden gem on defense. The combination of him in the leadership position and the bonuses from Territory Wars actually make the team formidable and actually a pain in the butt if people don't have a Thrawn for offense. So that's a surprisingly good defense team. But if you don't have Kylo Ren Unmasked and you have a Phasma, you can run that as an offensive team. And what are some other good offensive teams? Maybe like an Empire team that you have a bunch of mixed match characters. But yeah, basically the kitchen sink. You just throw everything you have on offense.
Like a Veer's lead trooper team might be good to say for offense for those Night Sisters
yeah.
come across.
Sometimes people run droids on defense. Not all the time. I haven't ran into it every Territory Wars, but I do save a sort of anti-droid offensive team. It's kind of like a Dacha lead with like Ugnaughts and some other like anti-droid characters in there. And you can use your Wigs, your old Wigs team, like with Wedge, Biggs, Han ST, Lando. That can work on offense, but that's also a good defensive team. It just kind of depends on how stretched you are. Like I said, some people go more defense and they put way more defensive teams, and other people do half, and then some people just go all out of offense. I do about half. What do you guys do?
In the guild that we're in, a lot of people participate and join in, but some of them don't spend their rosters on offense or defense. And so we're in kind of a different age of this game. We're over really since the summer, especially when Territory Medals came out at the end of the summer. You can no longer just have your friend at a low level in the guild. Like, everyone needs to participate and do their best, even if it's just, a few combat missions or just attacking and taking down the protection of someone in Territory Wars. Everyone needs to participate is kind of an important thing. And whether or not pushing people too hard for it is another issue we're running into, because the payout is essentially a couple pieces of gear less and one Zeta less at the end of the 3 days, right? So it depends what kind of guild one is in for how much this matters, whether it's not pushing to, cut your teeth on the edge of what is capable for the entire guild, or just writing it out and letting everyone log in when they can and do what they can, and then getting paid slightly less for the exact same amount of effort. So, I don't know. It's a hard thing, and it depends on what the culture of one's guild is, I would guess.
So I, in my opinion, like Territory Wars is more of a like you're facing another guild, so it's just really bragging rights, right? But in discussions we've had, because we set up there's a server that's set up so you can meet people in the guild that you're facing, so you can get in rooms with them and chat with them, and you can talk smack, or you can sit there and talk strategy with them if you want. You can try and figure out ways
memes.
You can do whatever, right?
We post memes all the time.
In my experience, for the most part, it's just bragging rights. You're not getting so little of the payout in comparison to the winner that it really matters. It's not something I personally, I don't think it's something that you should stress over, like trying to win Territory Wars, being that for the most part, there's not enough deviation in the first and second place payouts to, well, like I said, I just don't think you should stress it. The game that you can focus on to improve. Like, personally, I think that doing your best to participate in the guild activities and make sure you at least post a 0, if not participate in every raid, is more important than the payout for a territory war.
That's a really good point, and I would actually like to stress that since all of the amazing gear went into the guild store, it suddenly makes things like stacking your Galactic War table on Monday to save it for after payout on Tuesday, so that you can be one of the highest ranking people. It's only a couple extra Guild War tokens, right, in terms of currency, but it makes a huge difference because that is probably the best store in the game, and it also encourages people to participate in raids rather than just post a 0, because for the currency alone, no matter what the roll is on the gear that you get on the drop, the currency is worth it, in my opinion.
Okay, so the guild store, the revamp to the guild store has been super nice. The guild event store, I think so TW gives you the majority of the rewards are guild store currency. I think we're talking about the Zetas, and I think the difference of the Zetas is small. I think also the guild store currency difference is small. It might add up over time. I think it's probably not worth all the stress, and you should probably still focus on, if your guild's not able to beat the tank raid, beating that, and if your guild's not hitting a certain benchmark in TB, focus on that. But I think if your guild is set to really do well in TW, I think you should probably go for it. So the first TW is set on Jakku, right? There's bonuses for resistance and first order. There are some guilds out there that probably have a significant, amounts of first order teams. Like maybe they're just a bunch of Kylo Ren fanboys. I don't know, but they might have like a lot of first order teams, and that makes that guild potentially stronger in territory wars if they haven't really slacked off on some of their other teams. And
anyone who has BB-8 has first order. Are you recommending that people use first order on defense?
What I'm trying to gather is say, I guess, is that the next territory war map, maybe you don't have a lot of resistance and first order teams on your guild, but whatever the next territory war map is, there will be another faction or two that have passive bonuses, and maybe that's the time to really just if your guild is really prepared and has all those like factions ready to go and they're like gear 11 or gear 12 and Zeta, maybe you focus on TW more then. But if you're really not super prepared for TW now, it shouldn't be stressed over. It's a fun game mode.
I think that was the point I missed when a point I wanted to make. Really, it's more like you said, if you're not prepared for it, it's not something to stress for, because all the work you do to prepare for territory battles and things you do for your arena, those things will eventually translate to territory wars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like gearing up an Imperial Trooper team for Dark Side TB can help you fight Night Sisters on offense in TW. It's all linked.
And I think the territory war mode itself is successful because there's so little discrepancy between the two payouts. Like you don't have to be really, you don't have to have 8 completely maxed out teams yet. Eventually we'll all get.
That's true. Lower teams can work.
Fun because it's more, like I said, it's about the bragging rights, less about the payout.
Yeah.
Like losing once isn't going to determine you losing forever, because if there was a massive discrepancy between the payouts, pretty much losing one territory battle or territory war from the beginning would set you back much further than the guild you faced, right? So if you kept winning, you're probably going to keep winning until you just go up against the guild that's just so stacked up top they beat
it's the same phenomena that we found with a lot of people jumping ship to go to other guilds because they wanted a higher TB star count, to realize that it really didn't do much for them at all in terms of their actual progression in the game. That's noticed, definitely, and greatly appreciate, is that having a great community of people to play this game with makes it a lot more tolerable in almost every situation. So, thanks guys for being here and everything that you offer. Anyway, I think that we have digested most of the meat tonight, unless you guys have some other points. I think we can wrap it up, yeah? So, Nukin, what are your main projects right now?
Well, we were just talking about territory wars, and this is probably not the best return on investment, because I don't plan on using her on my arena team, but I am grinding the gear for Barris, because I'm going to Zeta her for territory wars. So I'm just grinding a bunch of some raid gear. I think like a scanner right now, and I think I need to give her a stun gun. So a bunch of Kerbantes as usual. But that's my little mini project right now. What are you working on, Morningstar?
So on my main account, I finally am biting the bullet, and I'm working on gearing Kenobi, and we know that that's a process. On my main, I actually just finished gear 12ing my fifth Phoenix. So they're pretty much done, aside from the after gear 12 gear. So I'm moving on to Kenobi Zeris. I already Zated my Barris just to get it out of the way. I just need to work on the ancillary characters. Like, I finally unlocked Commander Luke on my free-to-play alt account as well. So he's kind of taking priority at the moment. Pretty much it. And yeah, just generally, there are Talisman events coming up in 3 days. And I know how long that's going to take, being free-to-play. So I'm also working on acquiring mods for my Night Sister team to just hopefully not have to mod swap, because I never really did a whole lot of like health mod farming, and I feel like a few of those characters are going to be most well suited to health mods, the nature of the team and all.
Fortunately, those are easy to farm. Is that it's better to focus on getting someone to gear 12 than the pieces afterwards. Although a lot of those are incidental, and you'll get the territory stuff, and spending the currency. But getting people to gear 12 seems to be more valuable than putting the pieces on them afterwards. And I am very excited about potentially putting a Zeta on someone who is not someone I think it needs to be, which is Rey. She needs her last Zeta, but I would like it to give it to someone like Death Trooper or Krennic, someone that I just felt more meaningful for, but I don't think it's going to matter that much for them. So we'll see how that works out.
On that note, I do think Krennic's Zeta is really good.
Yes, especially for Darkside territory battles. But on that note, let's actually plug the next podcast. We're going to do a whole theme on Darkside territory battles, including footage from Nukin on playtesting and proving the concepts of like what works for the later phases.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like a whole another hour we can fill with that. So in any case,
stay tuned for that. Then.
Stay tuned, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Nukin. Thanks, Morningstar. And if anyone's listening to this, you know where to find us. And we will catch you next time.
Cheers, sluts.
Happy New Year's, you beautiful, scary people.
Happy New Year! Cheers.
Cheers.